They are indeed, David, and to be clear, my sources are describing a gruesome scene at that school. They are aware of some of the numbers, including the number 14 that Aaron just reported. Sources saying they're being careful because the situation is so confusing and so gruesome. But make no mistake, they are describing multiple dead at that school. They are telling me that the highest levels of federal law enforcement are being briefed on it as we speak. I was just with the Attorney General at a press conference a few moments ago. He acknowledged that he was being briefed on the situation right before the press conference. He was seeking additional information. So literally the information is flowing. It's a very small community. They're trying to get details from a obviously overwhelmed small police department. But again, the details that we have, multiple dead. Again, a number of numbers are being floated around in terms of the number of dead. Sources saying be careful with the numbers, in fact, because it's such a confusing situation. However, they're making clear that we should get people there as soon as possible because this is not going to be anything but an ugly scene that has been playing out over and over again. I cannot tell you how depressed and sad some of these law enforcement officials are that are contacting us, David.
I think the country shares that sentiment with them. Pierre, just 10 days ago, you and I were in Buffalo, reporting on the awful shooting in Buffalo, New York. Just 9 days ago, our team in California reporting from Laguna Woods, the gunman who walked into a church there. Now our team on the way to Uvalde, Texas, where again this afternoon, another school shooting in this country. As Pierre just reported, law enforcement telling our team, and I'm sure many others, that this is going to be yet another horrific scene in this country. Again, the hospital in that very small community confirming to ABC News that several people were brought to that hospital for help. The hospital reporting at least 2 children dead, which is an awful number in and of itself. Then sources reporting that the number could actually be far higher when we get a clearer picture of what's playing out in this community. FBI and federal sources telling Pierre Thomas simply that this is going to be a horrific scene when it's all said and done. We do know that authorities in that community plan to brief reporters at some time in the near future. Of course, we'll bring that to you as soon as we have it. In the meantime, I want to bring in Elizabeth Newman, formerly with the Department of Homeland Security. And Elizabeth, you don't need me to tell you that this has been a problem for many years in this country, and particularly in these last couple of weeks. Authorities have been warning that this could get even worse.
That's right, David. We've sadly been expecting more of these types of attacks, but it really is gut-wrenching when it's an elementary school. It reminds us of Newtown in December of 2012 when another elementary school was hit. And there just are no words. We have got to figure out a way to be able to identify individuals that are showing signs and indications that they want to commit acts of violence, and we have to find a way to start to prevent this. It is just an epidemic of violence that we have seen at historic levels for the last 5 years, and it looks, by all indications, to be another horrid year, possibly likely to break records with the number of active shooters and the number of incidents of violence in this country.
Our thanks to you. I want to go back to Aaron Katersky, who is just reporting in more information from his sources. Aaron, what are you learning?
David, initially reported as taking place outside the school, ABC News has now been told by multiple law enforcement sources that there was gunfire inside this school, Robb Elementary in Uvalde, Texas, by a gunman who is, according to these sources, dead, an 18-year-old male that came into that school with an unknown firearm or firearms, and authorities are now exploring what his connection might have been to that school. They're not exactly certain. They are working with a name, and they are now also scouring social media, looking for any background and any connections that he may have with any other people. But at the moment, authorities are of the belief that even though this was initially reported to have taken place outside the school, there was gunfire inside the school with multiple dead, including, sadly, David, a number of children.
Aaron Katersky reporting that the suspect, they have a name, they're working the case of potential contacts to the school. And for those of you who have been watching from the beginning, one of my questions early on was whether or not this played out inside the school or outside. Early reports had been that this was off campus. Aaron Kotursky now reporting that it was inside that school, which obviously makes more sense given the scope of this tragedy unfolding before our eyes here late this afternoon. Again, Uvalde, Texas, you can see law enforcement on the scene. It's been growing since we've been on the air. Robb Elementary School, reports of a young gunman going into that school and opening fire. Reports, sources telling ABC News, and this number is a difficult number to report this afternoon, but that as many as 14 could be dead, and that would include several children. We do know that the Uvalde Memorial Hospital, which is in that very small rural community, has reported to ABC News that at least 2 children have died, either upon arrival or since arriving at that hospital. So we know that particular number, but authorities have been telling us this afternoon that the number will likely get far worse. I want to bring in Brad Garrett, longtime ABC News contributor, formerly with the FBI. And Brad, we've been on the air far too many times with stories like these. We heard Elizabeth say earlier that authorities had been warning that the number of cases like this one could sadly rise over the course of the coming months, and we have seen just a stunning couple of weeks in this country.
So, David, you have to look at this from the side that these are almost impossible to stop unless you have, as Elizabeth said, some advanced information. The number of firearms, the number of the millions of AR-type weapons, we don't know if that was used, but something like that perhaps today. Elementary schools typically do not have security because they typically don't need it. And so the combination of maybe no officer there, a person with overwhelming firepower, probably had to go through very little security. And think about Buffalo, as you mentioned. Shooter started outside, shot people outside the school, then shot his way in. Perhaps you had the same version here. But to not repeat myself, we are at the mercy of what we know about people in advance. And without that, there is no realistic way to stop these.
Brad Garrett with us as we continue to follow this as well. Brad, thank you. And we'll come back to you if needed along the way here, certainly. And again, we're expecting to hear from authorities there on the scene a short time from now. And of course, we'll be back on the air when that happens so that you can get a clearer portrait, a clearer picture of what's playing out in Uvalde, Texas. What we do know, before I send many of you to your local news, is that there has been a school shooting at Robb Elementary School there in Uvalde, Texas, about 80 miles outside of San Antonio. The hospital there in that very small rural community already confirming at least 2 children dead. Sources telling ABC News that number will likely grow far higher once they come before the camera a short time from now. We'll continue our coverage on ABC News Live and on abcnews.com. We'll be right back on the air as soon as authorities come to the cameras. And of course, I'll be back with the entire team for World News Tonight. In the meantime, for many of you, it's your local news. I'm David Muir in New York. We'll see you shortly.
This has been a special report from ABC News.
Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas, just outside of San Antonio. We learned multiple children were shot inside that school. Sources telling ABC News as many as 14 dead, including several children in this Texas elementary school shooting. Again, that number very hard to report. Again, early reports tell us that 14, according to sources, 14 people are dead, including children. As you take a look at the scene there, law enforcement, there's a very large law enforcement presence. They're on that scene where school officials are warning people, including parents, to stay away from the campus at this time. The school posting an announcement on its website saying, please do not pick up students at this time. Students need to be accounted for before they are released to your care. You'll be notified to pick up students once all are accounted for. That announcement also, again, on the school's website, notifying parents that students are being transported to a nearby civic center for reunification. You can imagine it is a confusing and chaotic scene there in a very rural part of Texas there. You see some of the images that are coming out of that community there, assuming that those are parents who are running toward the scene, trying to get to their children. But again, the school putting that alert up on its website, telling parents to stay away from the scene and to go to a nearby civic center where they will be able to be reunited with their children. But at this hour, sources telling ABC News that as many as 14 dead including several children in that Texas school shooting. It happened earlier this afternoon. Again, a large law enforcement presence on that scene. We understand the FBI, ATF, DHS, the Justice Department, also the federal investigation and federal assistance that will be launched to help the local authorities there in Texas. You see people who are lined up along the fence there, a number of Department of Public Safety and there in Texas. Those officers also on that scene of Robb Elementary School. We understand, according to sources, that the 18-year-old suspect, at first there were reports that he was taken into custody, but we now understand, according to sources, that that 18-year-old suspect is dead. We also understand that, according to our investigative reporter, Aaron Katursky, that there was gunfire inside the school. The earlier reports and preliminary reports were that the gunfire was outside and that this was an incident mostly outside, but we understand that the shots were fired inside. There are a number of questions at this hour right now, including were these students targeted? How did this all play out inside this school? Again, a very rural community, about 60 miles from the Mexico border there in Texas. Again, we just got this information in that parents are asked to pick up students at the regular dismissal times at their child's campus there. There will be no bus transportation. Authorities just trying to get as much information out to these parents because, as you would imagine, the feelings that are going through them, the emotions that are the raw emotions that are going through those parents at this hour, especially as they hear that horrible number. One is just too many, but to hear 14 is just unimaginable, just what that community right now is going through as authorities try to sort this out and we try to get as much information as possible. We are continuing to cover this breaking news there in Uvalde, Texas. We're going to take a quick break. We understand that a news conference will happen momentarily, and we'll bring that to you live right here on ABC News Live. Stick with us.
Steel barricades, another strike.
The Right Now look at the day ahead, how it affects you and your family.
Record high gas prices.
Has apparently not only been taken into custody, but sources say the shooter, the 18-year-old shooter, is dead. For more, let's bring in former FBI agent Brad Garrett and ABC News contributor Elizabeth Newman, ABC News Chief Justice Correspondent Pierre Thomas, also with us during this coverage here. And Pierre, what do we know? What is the latest from your sources?
Well, we know that multiple people have been killed, including some children. Sources are describing it as a gruesome scene, that the highest levels of FBI, DOJ are being briefed on the situation as we speak. Authorities are mortified because of the sheer number of children potentially involved in this. Again, that number 14 is a number I've heard as well, but sources are saying that it's a very confusing situation given how gruesome it is and just how devastating the situation is. So these numbers could change, but they are being clear that multiple people are dead, including children.
Yeah, we want to be as careful as possible when we're reporting out these details. And I know, Pierre, you and I have talked, especially when we've covered these types of incidents before, these mass shootings, and we cannot stress enough how preliminary those numbers are.
Again, these situations are very fluid. Again, sometimes victims appear extremely injured. Authorities may think they're dead. They take them to the hospital and they're able to be revived. There's all kinds of confusing situations. What we know is that suspect, believed to be 18 years old, made his way into that school and apparently shot fatally a number of people. We are told that the suspect, again, is 18 years old, that the suspect is dead. We're also being told that the Border Patrol was in the vicinity and came to the school to help with the medical response. Just sheer chaos and a devastating scene.
And Brad Garrett, when you're law enforcement, they're trying to sort through the details here, no matter where it is, but you've got this rural community here. There's a lot for law enforcement to do right now on that scene.
Well, there is no doubt. I mean, just trying to put together exactly what this shooter did. Initially reported that it started outside the school, which is fairly textbook of a number of shootings, including in Buffalo last week, where the shooter started in a parking lot and then went into the supermarket. He would have predictably met with little or no security. There aren't officers assigned to elementary schools in most jurisdictions because there's really no reason, may or may not even been any security to go through, or very little to get into this school. And so once the shooter was inside, he could pretty much do whatever he wanted within a few minutes. And sadly, let's use Sandy Hook in Newtown as an example. I mean, Adam Lanza killed multiple children in under 5 minutes. And so it takes little time if you have the right armament, and it looks like, sadly, this guy did. But there is a lot for law enforcement to do. They've got to process the scene. Obviously, the first layer of this is always the safety and security of people that were injured and clearing the school. Now, this sounds like it's like most school shooters. It's a lone actor, so you're probably not looking for anyone else. But you may well, at some point, not immediately, look for associates. Where did the weapon come from? I assume they have it since the shooter's down. So you're going to look for those tentacles, and obviously they're throwing together the best they can from social media, old addresses, cell phone numbers, etc. Who is this kid? Why was he there? Is he part of the community? Was he connected to the school? Did he go to school there at some point? All that becomes important, not immediately, but it certainly becomes important as you pull this case together.
Elizabeth, you heard Brad just mention Sandy Hook. We have a whole list of other schools where there have been mass shootings, but it appears that another soft target has been attacked.
That's right, and Sandy Hook is what we all think of in a moment like this because of the age, and elementary school being a target. Usually when we hear of school shootings, it tends to be high schools. Not that that's not devastating, but there is something particularly gut-wrenching about the idea of the targets being little kids. And so it's just... We're hoping for the best, and it is a fluid situation, so there's still a little glimmer of hope that maybe it won't be as bad, but the authorities are certainly indicating that it's a gruesome scene, and we as a society have continued to run into these horrific scenes of violence and murder, and sometimes in the name of an ideology, sometimes some other grievance, sometimes unknown why people do this, and my heart just breaks for the families that are awaiting news and trying to reconnect with their loved ones. But sadly, we know that these mass attacks are continuing to increase. We're kind of on a 5-year high of active shooter incidents and people being killed, with the lone exception of 2020 when we had less people killed, simply because we weren't gathering in person as frequently. But the FBI released just yesterday their 2021 numbers of active shooter incidents, and it's back up pretty significantly. And over 100 people were killed in 2021 from active shooter incidents. And the trajectory we're on this year looks to be that we're going to meet it, if not exceed it. And this is consistent with all of the threat warnings that the federal government has been issuing, that extremist experts have been warning about, that we are in a heightened threatened environment where a variety of grievances, a variety of extremist ideologies are motivating people to go and carry out these horrific attacks. It's heartbreaking, and yet I think we're going to see more of this until we can figure out a way to bring a stop to this kind of violence in our country.
And that is unfortunate as we see this tragic scene play out there in Uvalde, Texas. Let's bring in our chief investigative reporter here at ABC, Josh Margolin, on the phone. Josh, do we know any more at this point, at this hour? I know information is still flying in.
Yeah, we're still in the preliminary reporting phase. This has really been a bit of a trickle, and sometimes with these stories, you end up not getting the information all at one time. The Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security has now put out information that he's been briefed on the shooting. And we also know that there was, in fact, a customs agent who did respond to offer assistance on hearing the reports, and that people were seeing, the FBI and the ATF are rushing in to assist. But in terms of the number of people who have been injured, the number of people who have terribly been dead, we don't really have an update as of yet right now as we're sitting here speaking.
Yeah, and Josh, just 10 days ago, we were reporting on the mass shooting in Buffalo and the prevalence of not only gun violence, the epidemic of gun violence, but soft targets, being vulnerable, being at risk, and the fact that that community in Buffalo is still grieving while we see another one here in this country about to go through the same thing.
No, and in fact, I was speaking with some of our sources and the officials that we talk to all the time, just covering the news, and going into this past weekend, there were concerns that, given that it was a week after what happened in Buffalo, and then there was immediately right after that a mass shooting at a church in Orange County, California, there were concerns that we were on the precipice of seeing yet some additional type of violence. As Elizabeth Newman just said, people are taking to weapons. Sometimes we see that they are, in their deranged view, acting out on behalf of some sort of ideology, a terrorism kind of thing, ISIS or Al-Qaeda, like with 9/11, or we saw ISIS, some jihadist thing in San Bernardino, California in 2015. Sometimes we see that it's people who are just deranged. We see people who are acting out in domestic situations. There was a terrible mass shooting in Texas. We can rattle these things off. The pity is that we're sitting here in 2022 and we can rattle off these locations, and the only reason they've managed to break through and get national media attention and attention of national leaders is because they've been these quiet, smaller towns that have been decimated by these mass shootings. And at bottom, does it really matter what a shooter's perceived cause is? The shooters are shooting. And they're killing our children, and they're killing adults, and they're killing people who are just going to supermarkets and just going to school. It's just such a terrible reality.
Yeah, no one's safe. Going to the grocery store, going to school, going to church. Just very, very tragic. Very, very tragic there. Josh, hold on for us. We are getting sound interviews from our ABC affiliate there on the ground out of San Antonio. That's there in Uvalde, Texas. Again, the scene playing out just outside of San Antonio. As you can imagine, some parents extremely worried trying to get to their children. Take a listen.
And I keep asking questions of what's going on, and nobody's telling me anything. Nobody's telling me anything. Just confused and worried when I'm trying to find out where my baby's at.
Again, the school there trying to get out information to those parents so they can reunite with their children. As soon as we get that information, we'll pass it on as well. We understand a local civic center is a place where a number of those students are being taken so they can reunite with their parents. A lot of parents rushing to that scene, but authorities telling parents to stay away from that campus. Our investigative reporter, Aaron Katursky, also with us. Some of the numbers that are coming out of there, again, Aaron, just horrible to even just imagine. As many as 14 dead according to sources. What's the latest?
Yeah, and Kenneth, I can attest to parents rushing to pick up their kids. I remember covering the Newtown school shooting in 2012 in Newtown, Connecticut, and they were telling the parents the same thing, stay away. But how do you tell parents to stay away from a place where their kids may be in danger? We understand that the 18-year-old suspected gunman is dead, and there was gunfire inside Robb Elementary School earlier today. Initially, Kenneth, this was reported as an incident that may have happened outside of the school or maybe nearby, but given the horrific death toll that we are hearing about now, authorities are telling us there was some gunfire inside the school. A number of children are among the dead, and we're checking to see how many others may be among the dead as well.
And so at this point, in the investigation, we know obviously pretty large there. A preliminary report so far. So we don't know at this point, were those students targeted? Was this gunman trying to get in the school? Was there anyone who was able to stop him?
In fact, one of the things that law enforcement's trying to do now is work with the name of the shooter that they have. They have not released it publicly, but they are working with a name, we're told, trying to run down contacts to see if he may have had any connection with that particular elementary school there in Uvalde, Texas. They're also scouring social media to see if there are any associates who may be making statements about this that they might be able to talk to get some insight as to what had happened and why. And the ATF, the FBI, all of the agencies have responded to this scene, knowing that it is going to be quite grim and gruesome inside. But they are trying to ascertain still, Kenneth, exactly how this unfolded, where the gunfire started, where it ended. We know that Border Patrol agents were called and responded to the scene. We're trying to figure out if maybe one of their agents was somehow caught in the gunfire. There have been a number of different possibilities for who was hit and who may be involved, and the authorities are there now trying to sort it out.
Yeah, and as we work on getting more details from Uvalde, Texas, Aaron, I have to ask you about the fact that it was about a week ago that we were on the air talking about Buffalo, New York, and the mass shooting there and the prevalence of gun violence, the epidemic of gun violence in this country.
And here, another individual able to get at least one firearm. We don't know the nature of the firearm or firearms that were used in this particular shooting. It's that ready access to guns that seems to be the common denominator here, no matter what the exact motive for a particular shooting is. There are some 400 million firearms in circulation in the United States, in excess of the number of people in terms of population count that the country has. So there is ready access, Texas especially. Whether that ultimately plays a role, the access to guns in this shooting, still too early to say.
Yeah, and we, again, are awaiting a news conference there from the local officials. We're hoping to hear from the sheriff or investigators, anyone who give us more information about what's happening on that scene there. Again, just to reset and recap here, there's been a school shooting at Robb Elementary there in Uvalde, Texas, just outside of San Antonio. It was reported just, a little more than an hour ago. It's a rural community, less than 20,000 people, predominantly Hispanic. We know that immigration issues and other issues that that we would expect to come out in a near border town there in Texas to have. They've been going through those immigration issues, according to the local mayor. But again, we don't know the motive for this incident or this shooting as investigators gather information there on that scene. A very large police presence there as parents try to find their children and reunite with their children. We understand that authorities are taking students off that campus and transferring them to another location, and they will reunite them with their parents, but they're trying to secure that scene, make sure it's secure. Again, an 18-year-old male apparently is dead, according to sources. Brad Garrett is with us as we take a look at that video coming in there, that scene that is playing out there in Texas. Does it matter? This location, does it matter? The fact that it's a rural community, that it's 60 miles from the Mexico border, will that complicate things for federal authorities who are assisting? Will it complicate things for the local authorities as they try to figure out and piece all of this together?
Well, think about sort of the limited both emergency services and law enforcement you would have in a community that small and that rural. So the idea that they could pull together first responder type officers that would know how to go into a school when there's an active shooter may or may not be available in those settings. Getting qualified or experienced investigators to a scene, this scene probably cries out to have the FBI's evidence response team actually process it, because they do it all the time. So to your point, it may take longer to do things and sort them out just because you don't have the ready availability of an urban setting. Buffalo being the most recent example, you had people on the scene, you had FBI on the scene, there's a big FBI office in Buffalo, so forth and so on. So expect whatever comes out of that scene to take probably at least into tomorrow, or if not longer, before they're done. And pulling together people who would know how to really run a background investigation on this 18-year-old, again, I'm sure it's being done as we speak, getting the right people to do that, to piece together the information or intelligence there might be out there. His age, obviously at 18, would sort of lend the idea that he has a social media footprint. Typically kids that age do. What has he said? Did he talk about this in advance? Where did the weapon come from? Did he recently purchase it? So forth and so on. All of these things will get pulled together, maybe not today, but certainly will get pulled together as we sort of figure out, again, another mass shooting that we couldn't stop, that we won't be able to stop unless we know about them in advance.
And we just received some information in from Texas Governor Greg Abbott. Aaron Katersky, I know you're still with me and reading through this information as well. I'm sure you're getting some from your sources. As you reported, Aaron, 18-year-old male who was shot and killed, or at least is known to be dead at this time, has been identified by the governor as Salvador Roma, a student at nearby Uvalde High School. Again, this happened at Robb Elementary School. The governor, they're saying they obviously now know who the shooter was. The shooter is no longer alive. Let me give you some details, and then I'll give you the summation about that. The shooter was Salvador Roma, an 18-year-old male who resided in Uvalde. It's believed that he abandoned his vehicle and entered into the Robb Elementary School in Uvalde with a handgun, and he may have also had a rifle, but that has not yet been confirmed according to the most recent report. The governor there, Aaron, giving a few more details.
And crucially, according to Governor Greg Abbott, 14 students at Robb Elementary School were shot and killed. A teacher was also killed. The suspect also shot his grandmother right before entering the school. This 18-year-old is said to be a high school student at Uvalde High School who goes into to Robb Elementary School, shoots 14 students, killed a teacher, and we're still waiting to see just how the conditions of everyone else that's involved. 14 students shot, a teacher killed, and the shooter's grandmother also shot by this 18-year-old shooter, again, all according to Texas Governor Greg Abbott.
Those numbers, those details, just really hard to comprehend, Aaron. Again, that just coming in from Greg Abbott moments ago, confirming the 14 dead there. The number that, to be honest, I will say, Aaron, that I was hoping that it would be lowered. 0 would be the best number. But at this point, we are learning that 14 dead.
And I believe, and I know the governor said it differently, the name that we're working with now is Salvador Ramos.
Salvador Ramos. Okay. That sounds Mexican. I don't know. I could be wrong. It sounds like a Mexican name. There's also a report that came out 2 minutes ago that says nearly 30 people were shot at the elementary school, at least 16 dead. So that was 2 minutes ago.
According to the governor and to some law enforcement officials in Texas, 18-year-old student at Uvalde High School who appears to have killed his grandmother before walking into Robb Elementary School and opening fire, shooting 14 students, killing a teacher. And I guess we'll wait to see the condition of those students, but my God.
Yeah, unimaginable. Thank you for that correction there on the name. Again, Salvador Ramos is the name that Governor Greg Abbott has ID'd this student who, again, 18-year-old Uvalde High School student there. We are going to work to wrap our heads around what is happening there in Uvalde, Texas, with that number and the amount of young life lost at this hour. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back.
One more huge twist.
Are they going to try to take our guns, guys?
Friday night at 9/8.
Do you think they'll try to take the guns? Do you think they'll start trying to change laws to take our guns now?
We are back and continuing our coverage of the shooting at an elementary school in Texas. Governor Greg Abbott confirming that 14 students, one teacher, and the shooter are dead. Just some horrific and tragic details. This after an active shooting was reported at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas, outside of San Antonio. There is a large law enforcement presence on that scene where school officials are warning people, including parents, to stay away from the campus at this time. The school posting an announcement on its website saying, please do not pick up students at this time. Students need to be accounted for before they are released to your care. You will be notified to pick up students once all are accounted for. That announcement also notifying parents that students are being transported to the nearby Civic Center for reunification. Let's bring in former FBI agent Brad Garrett and ABC News contributor Elizabeth Newman and Chief Investigative Correspondent Aaron Katursky on the phone with us. Now, John Cohen, also former acting undersecretary at DHS. Aaron, we were aware that Customs and Border Patrol officials who were in that area responded to assist with law enforcement as well. But I want to go back to the fact that we have now confirmed, according to Greg Abbott, that 14 students and a teacher and the shooter all killed in this incident.
The Texas governor laying out the horror of this shooting, Kenneth. A 18-year-old high school student at Uvalde High School there in South Texas by the name of Salvador Ramos, according to the governor, shot his grandmother before going to Robb Elementary School, going inside and opening fire, shooting 14 students, killing a teacher. The suspect, that 18-year-old Salvador Ramos, is also dead, according to multiple law enforcement officials who had responded to the scene along with the FBI, the ATF, and Customs and Border Protection. Now, we understand that a Border Patrol agent was shot in the crossfire, said, though, thankfully, to be in good condition. But it gives you a sense that there must have been an awful lot of gunfire in that elementary school before the suspect was finally subdued.
Yeah, and again, according to Greg Abbott, 2 responding officers were struck by rounds but have no serious injuries. On the phone, John Cohen, former acting undersecretary at DHS. John, from your point of view, a horrific scene there and a lot of work by law enforcement to try to figure out what happened.
Yeah, and unfortunately, this shooting is yet another in a growing list of shootings. And while there's a lot of investigative work still to be done, it's highly likely that this will be another young individual who felt socially disconnected, who felt victimized by society, who was angry. I suspect he probably spent a lot of time online looking at past shootings and ultimately cultivating either some type of grievance, whether it was toward the school or others, but basically forming the justification for using violence as a way to express his anger. There's a lot more we need to be doing to deal with this issue. There's a lot more we can be doing from the standpoint of how we analyze online activity. There's a lot more that we can be doing at the community level. I suspect that we will learn that this individual did give off warning signs, whether it was through his online activity or in other behaviors. So, as I wrote this weekend on ABC.com, it's getting to the point where many in law enforcement are saying how many have to die before we come together as a society to deal with these issues.
Yeah, the list goes on and on of mass shooting scenes in this country, especially over the past 10 to 15 years. Brad Garrett, let me bring you in because, again, the Texas governor saying that this was a Uvalde high school student, and he also made a point to say that this was a U.S. citizen, likely because of, where this town is, just a few miles or 60 miles from the Mexico border, a town that has dealt with immigration issues. We don't know the motive here, but the governor making a point that the suspect is a U.S. citizen or was a U.S. citizen.
So let's go back to how we believe this started, which is the killing of his grandmother. That becomes relevant in my view because if you think about Adam Lanza at Sandy Hook, he killed his mother before he went to the school, which sort of generally tells you he really wants to annihilate anyone that was an issue in his life. Now, you would ask, why is this elementary school an issue? My guess is going to be it's not the school itself, it's not individual students, obviously, or teachers, but it's what it represents in his head. And he knew that in the short term, he could do anything he wanted inside that school. And so, that's going to be some of the focus of this investigation is, what was the precipitating event, et cetera. All of those things, extremely important. But, we can't miss the bigger picture, as I mentioned earlier, that, stopping these guys is really the issue. And there's no easy way to do that. And it really does boil down, as John Cohen said, you can certainly monitor social media the best you can, but that has its real limitations because of the number of people that are online. The key really is getting communities to tell you what's going on. I guarantee you there's information about this 18-year-old, whether it's at the high school or other kids that he associated with, or maybe even the teachers have picked up bits and pieces of information. But there's a thing called leakage where people spew out information that becomes very telling once you go back and look at a case. And they're going to be, attempting to collect that. But we could sadly have this conversation every day. I don't even like saying that, but that's kind of where we are with firearms availability and the anger and rage that's going on in this country. It really doesn't help when you get into subjects like immigration, minorities, people of color. I mean, we keep having it. We don't know if any of those play into the shooting. Let me be clear. But the anger and rage in these arenas and people angry at other ethnicities or skin tone or whatever it might be, it's at a fever pitch. And so that actually adds, in my view, to increased shootings. That's a tough thing to get your arms around as far as doing anything in the short term to lower the temperature.
And Elizabeth Newman, again, former DHS official, we have heard of all types of motives. I know there are profiles that Brad mentions here, and we've seen, like in the Buffalo case, where there were red flags, where he was on the radar of law enforcement, and then we hear of incidents where the suspect was not on the radar of law enforcement. So essentially, we know that mass shootings have been prevented by law enforcement, but they don't make the headlines. These incidents do. But if we compare these other incidents, what happened in Buffalo, to this one, they appear at this point, as we wait to even learn more about the shooter and was he on the radar of law enforcement. I mean, some would ask, is there anything that can be done to raise enough red flags to stop an incident like this from happening?
So I agree with John. John and I both worked at the Department of Homeland Security on prevention, non-law enforcement prevention. And the social science, the psychologists, mental health professionals have developed signs and indicators of risk factors of somebody that goes on to carry out an attack. The Secret Service has done research on this. The FBI Behavioral Analysis Unit has done research on this. And we've taken that research, other academic research, and we've figured out how to train a community on what those indicators are. And what is lacking is both deploying that training widespread. In other countries, there are other places where they're doing this much better than we are. We have not brought that community awareness to scale. And then we need a safe referral mechanism for people to call if they feel uncomfortable calling law enforcement. We need to strengthen our mental health profession, not because terrorists are necessarily, or attackers are necessarily mentally ill. In fact, the data tells us in most cases they're no more mentally ill than the general population. But mental health professions can help those at-risk individuals choose a healthier path to deal with that underlying grievance, that underlying psychosocial factor that's driving them towards the ideology or the idea that violence might be the solution for what they're so upset about. If we can equip and strengthen our mental health providers in this country to be able to help those individuals at risk of violence, we can start to reduce these attacks. But what I just described, as Brad mentioned, this is not a short-term solution. This will take 5-10 years. And we started this process maybe 5 years ago. It is really, really nascent. And we need to rapidly scale. That requires increasing funding, and that requires state governors and local mayors taking ownership of this concept of prevention, because it can't get run out of Washington, D.C. This is inherently about communities coming together and taking ownership of making sure that their communities are safe. Again, this is next generation see something, say something. This is not about having more law enforcement intervention, but rather training people to understand if you see certain signs and indicators in a loved one or in a colleague, ask how they're doing and get them help if you think they're not doing okay. Getting them help may actually end up saving lives. And we have got to be having a more frank conversation about this. And this can't be all in law enforcement. There's too much of it. There are too many people that are struggling, especially.
And what kind of help? Drugs, some sort of pharmaceuticals.
After COVID, especially after the polarized conversations we're having in this country, we need to be engaging with people in civil discourse and getting people help if they're not doing well, and taking some of this off of law enforcement who are stretched too thin at this point.
Well said. And Elizabeth, you said it takes time, but John Cohen, as this country tries to get its act together, and it takes time, in the meantime, our children are dying, our elders are dying in grocery stores, our children in the halls of schools. And here we have another mass shooting at a school with double-digit numbers.
That's right. And as Brad said, we will likely, based on the current threat environment, be having the same discussion within the next few weeks. It's, on the same weekend that we had the shooting in Buffalo, we had mass shootings in other cities in the country as well. So what are some things we can be doing now?
I just want to interrupt this just for a second. I've been listening to it for quite a while now, and just got to get something off of my chest about this, because from what I understand, children are allowed to just go to the restroom, and there's not really any, hall monitors in some schools, so they'll just fight in the bathroom. And they make a habit of doing this, like they'll meet in the bathroom daily and fight. And as long as the kids don't get caught or whatever with like a video on their phone, um, a lot of stuff gets overlooked. A lot of stuff gets swept up under the rug. So they're creating an atmosphere like a freaking prison, in my opinion. It's it's just getting worse, and a lot of it has to do with social media, them being able to not see their people face to face. They can just write nasty messages on the internet to each other without physically looking each other in the eye and saying what needs to be said. And there needs to be more counselors at the school whenever there is a fight, not just, oh, here, apologize. That's what it was back when I was in school. Oh, just apologize, and go on. Like, there's probably a lot of underlying therapy or something that needs to be done, not just, you need to take your kid to the doctor and, it's too hyper, get him on some pills, I'd say 3/4, this is just a guess, but I'd say 3/4 of the children now are on some kind of mind-altering drug, and it's not healthy. Their minds are still growing until they're like 25 years old. Their brain is not fully developed. And as far as getting kids into therapy, you're excluding the Bible from their therapy. So it's just a worldly answer to a spiritual problem that no one will admit to. And I'm just, I'm overwhelmed with compassion for the parents and for the co-students, of those that are shot or injured. From what I understand now, there's like 30 that were shot and 14 that are dead, and maybe 15 that are dead. And then the grandma of the boy that did the shooting, and a teacher. And the grandma was 66 years old, from what what I was looking at. So, and I have a scripture I wanted to read for today. It says, "Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, who hath blessed us with all spiritual blessings in heavenly places in Christ. We give thee but thine own. Whatever the gift may be, all that we have is thine alone, a trust, O Lord, from thee." I wanted to also read 1 Timothy about the last days, about how the children, how people are going to act and turn on each other. And the Bible says in the days of Noah there was violence. So this is going to keep on being ongoing. There's, like the guy said, he already knows that we're going to be talking about this again in a week.
Communities across the country, as Elizabeth indicated, need to organize themselves. It's not so much was the person on the radar screen, the question we should be asking is the radar screen tuned the right way to pick up on an individual who may be in the community, who may be traveling down the path to violence? I think that there's a lot of work that can be done in that area, and whether it's an educator, a coworker, a student, a family member, or somebody who's seeing something online, we need to make sure people understand what are the warning signs. And then,
what are the chances that this 18-year-old kid got into our country illegally? Well, he's an adult now, so now what? If he gets, oh, well, he's dead. That's right, he's dead. They said that he was shot. I read somewhere that he was in custody, but he's dead. But in cases like this, if they live, and they go to jail, a lot of times they'll just let these people out, and there'll be 3 and 4 and 5 instances where they actually kill someone. And they let them right out of jail. Well, let's keep thinking of questions to ask.
And communities across the country have to take stock of what resources they have and what they can do to prevent an act of violence. I will say one other thing, and Brad said something that I totally agree with. We are an angry country, and in some cases, it's anger that's very individualized, and that can at times manifest itself in an individual using violence as a way to express that anger. But it's an anger. It's a flame of anger that's being fanned sometimes by our public discourse. And something that we could do immediately is to have our public figures, whether they be in government or in the media or in other parts of our society, work to reduce the temperature of the anger that's way too prevalent in our society, because our adversaries, they look at the societal fractures, whether it's on issues, as Brad said, on abortion or immigration or race or the election or the integrity of our election system, and they will leverage those fractures in our society, seek to exacerbate them by promoting content that's intended to fan the flames of the anger in our society. So a place where we can take steps immediately is for public officials to take a step back, take a breath, and try to calm the temperature a bit.
Yeah, we all have to take a breath right now, because at this hour we have 15 innocent lives taken, dead in the state of Texas, 14 of them children from Uvalde Elementary School. John, thank you. A big thanks to Elizabeth, Brad, and our whole entire ABC News team. We are continuing to monitor this breaking news story out of Uvalde, Texas.
His name was Salvatore Martinez or something like that. I don't know about the last name, if I said that right.
About what this person of those details to come out. Again, that press conference is now going to happen at 5 o'clock. We'll bring it to you. The latest, whenever it does happen, is going to be moving from the Civic Center here just a few miles down the road to the Fairplex. We'll be heading that way in just a few minutes.
Lee, Steve Spriester and Myra Arthur taking over for the...
I don't know why it's glitching.
About what this person of those details to come out. Again, that press conference is now going to happen at 5 o'clock. We'll bring it to you. The latest, whenever it does happen, is going to be moving from the Civic Center here just a few miles down the road to the Fairplex. We'll be heading that way in just a few minutes.
Lee, Steve Spriester and Myra Arthur taking over for the... With so much at stake in our world right now,
we it up a little bit.
National parks are incredibly safe places.
Good afternoon, I'm Kenneth Moe. We're continuing our coverage here with this breaking news of this school shooting in Texas. Multiple sources confirmed to ABC News that an 18-year-old male suspect is dead after an active shooting was reported at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas, just outside of San Antonio. We learned multiple children were shot inside that school. Sources telling ABC News as many as 14 dead, including several children in this Texas elementary school shooting. Again, that number very hard to report. Again, early reports tell us that 14, according to sources, 14 people are dead, including children. As you take a look at the scene there, there's a very large law enforcement presence. they're on that scene where school officials are warning people, including parents, to stay away from the campus at this time. The school posting an announcement on its website saying, please do not pick up students at this time. Students need to be accounted for before they are released to your care. You'll be notified to pick up students once all are accounted for. That announcement also, again, on the school's website, notifying parents that students are being transported to a nearby civic center for reunification. You can imagine it is a confusing and chaotic scene there in a very rural part of Texas there. You see some of the images that are coming out of that community there, assuming that those are parents who are running toward the scene, trying to get to their children. But again, the school putting that alert up on its website, telling parents to stay away from the scene and to go to a nearby civic center where they will be able to be reunited with their children. But at this hour, sources telling ABC News that as many as 14 dead, including several children in that Texas school shooting. It happened earlier this afternoon. Again, a large law enforcement presence on that scene. We understand the FBI, ATF, DHS, the Justice Department, also the federal investigation and federal assistance that will be launched to help the local authorities there in Texas. You see people who are lined up along the fence there, a number of Department of Public Safety there in Texas. Those officers also on that scene of Robb Elementary School. We understand, according to sources, that the 18-year-old suspect, at first there were reports that he was taken into custody, but we now understand, according to sources, that 18-year-old suspect is dead. We also understand that, according to our investigative reporter, Aaron Katersky, that there was gunfire inside the school. The earlier reports and preliminary reports were that the gunfire was outside and that this was an incident mostly outside, but we understand that the shots were fired inside. There are a number of questions at this hour right now, including were these students targeted? How did this all play out inside this school? Again, a very rural community, about 60 miles from the Mexico border there in Texas. Again, we just got this information in that parents are asked to pick up students at the regular dismissal times at their child's campus there. There will be no bus transportation. Authorities just trying to get as much information out to these parents, because as you would imagine, the feelings that are going through them, the emotions that are, the raw emotions that are going through those parents at this hour, especially as they hear that horrible number. One is just too many, but to hear 14 is just unimaginable, just what that community right now is going through as authorities try to sort this out, and we try to get as much information as possible. We are continuing to cover this breaking news there in Uvalde, Texas. We're going to take a quick break.
Okay, they're going to take another break. I wanted to show you this. I'm not sure if it'll be big enough for you to see, so I'll read it, but these are the demographics of the area, and they're gonna, use race for this. Just prepare your mind for it. The press secretary, she's been known, the new one, the black lady, she's been known to say racist, racist, racist a whole bunch of times. Oh yeah, my phone just died. Isn't that lovely? I thought that my cord was going to work, but yeah, I'm going to have to get a new cord.
Break. We understand that a news conference will happen momentarily. We'll bring that to you live right here on ABC News Live. Stick with us.
Oh, I still haven't watched that movie.
Big scene unfolding in Uvalde, Texas, about 80 miles outside San Antonio. A short time ago, Governor Greg Abbott confirming the number we sadly reported on earlier.
Okay, let me go check on something real quick before we move on with that. Greg Abbott. Right here, I wanted to play this for you.
The shooter was Salvador Romas, an 18-year-old male.
Salvador Romas. Romas?
The shooter was Salvador Romas, an 18-year-old male who resided in Uvalde. It's believed that he abandoned his vehicle and entered into the Robb Elementary School in Uvalde with a handgun, and he may have also had a rifle, but that is not yet confirmed according to my most recent report. He shot and killed horrifically, incomprehensibly, 14 students and killed a teacher. Mr. Romas, the shooter, he himself is deceased and is believed that responding officers killed him. The shooter was Salvador.
Well, that's it. I mean, there were a couple officers shot. He didn't talk about the grandma. Let's see what this guy has to say for 40 seconds.
Good afternoon, and we're coming on the air because of an awful scene playing out today in Texas. An active shooter for a time at an elementary school in Uvalde, Texas. This is about 80 miles outside of San Antonio. There is word potentially multiple children have been killed. This happened at the Robb Elementary School in the Uvalde Consolidated Independent School District. The alleged gunman opening fire off campus, then reportedly running into the school, barricading himself in a classroom where it's believed the shooting continued, the school on lockdown. Uvalde Memorial Hospital confirming at this hour 13 children arriving at the ER. That hospital also confirming to ABC News at least 2 children killed. But sources telling us at this hour this number could be far worse. Good afternoon, and we're coming on the air because
that was a little bit older. That was 57 minutes ago. There was also trying to find that other report, because there was also something that happened in Tennessee. See if I can find it. Might have been this one. Oh, we're not seeing this one. Okay. That was at Bexar County. At least 20 plus law enforcement and fire EMS have passed my work. So can you imagine those parents, and they're like at work, or they're hear a gunshot in the neighborhood and come run in, and you can't get to your child? Well, I'm not sure. Which one it was.
And at this point,
Yes, the one we're watching now. There it is. It says related video. 1 dead, 1 injured in shooting after high school graduation in Tennessee. So they just threw this one in here in this article, and it had a video, so I thought, hey, we'll just play it, see what's happening. Whoops. Rutherford County.
At about 8:51 p.m., Murfreesboro Police Department and MTSU police responded to a shooting on campus and found 2 people suffering from gunshots near the tennis courts next to Murphy Center. One victim is deceased and the other is injured and in critical but stable condition. Shooting occurred as individuals were leaving a high school graduation being hosted on the campus of Middle Tennessee State University. MPD Criminal Investigation Division is working closely with Middle Tennessee State University Police, Rutherford County Sheriff's Office, and the Tennessee Highway Patrol.
Riverdale High School is one of our larger high schools. Typically, there's several hundred parents in attendance, but I don't have an exact number.
So that's Rutherford County, Tennessee. It said 8 p.m., so that must have been last night. I didn't hear about it until today, so I just wanted to point it out, that this is, ongoing, that there's many shootings happening, and the children today are under real attack in many different ways. They're under attack. Let me read your comments here. If he has more than 2 or 3 names, he's from Mexico. those of Hamas who killed Israelis get $3,248 a month paid to their families, while the perpetrator gets jail time, where he gets his degree and stuff. Wow. Yeah, Bubba, that is unreal. The election fraud. Yeah, it's if they don't get in trouble, Nick, I have no high hopes that we'll ever have a free, fair election again. They better get in trouble, because they got their names, they got their faces, it's all on video, where they went. They kind of documented it all, didn't they? I haven't seen it yet, but I do want to see that. Went and saw Ted Nugent with special guest President Trump here in Austin last week. Oh, Ted Nugent's getting involved. That's pretty cool. Seen him on Alex Jones playing his guitar and shooting his bows and arrows. Made videos and they went viral. Awesome! And they took my Trump video down for violating community standards. Figures. Trump said the election was stolen. It has 2K view when it got taken down. That's too bad. I was trying to look up some of my stuff. I've been downloading a bunch of videos and stuff, and somewhere I've got a video that's 6 hours long from that day. So I want to go back over it and see it again, because they just snatched it down. Ted's got 1,800 views. Okay. Well, better to homeschool for sure. Yep.
14 children, he confirmed, have been killed in this shooting, along with a teacher at Robb Elementary School in the Uvalde district there. The alleged gunman is also dead, and we have just received an image of that gunman, 18 years old. Our investigative reporter, Aaron Petersky, with me now. Aaron, what more do we know about this suspect who is now...
Does he look Mexican to you guys? He doesn't really look Mexican. He looks like he's like ISIS or something. Oh, man.
Dead, believed to be a member of that community and that school district?
Indeed, David. He's identified by the governor of Texas as 18-year-old Salvador Ramos, a student at Uvalde High School, and he is believed to have shot and killed his grandmother before entering Robb Elementary School and opening fire with a firearm that has not yet been made clear, according to police. They're still trying to track down the weapon. Shot and killed 14 elementary school students, along with one teacher, and law enforcement sources tell us, David, that the suspect, 18-year-old Salvador Ramos himself, was killed there at the scene.
And Aaron, again, Salvador Ramos believed to be a student in that district.
A student in the very community where he opened fire, it's believed, according to police. A student at Uvalde High School. Whether he was still going to classes or whether he had stopped going hasn't been made clear. But according to the governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, Salvador Ramos is or was a student at Uvalde High School, the very community where Robb Elementary School is located, that came under fire by this gunman after he had shot and killed his grandmother. Authorities are now trying to go through his background to see what connection he may have had to that elementary school. They're also trying to run down social media and find any potential friends or acquaintances, just to see if there were any accomplices or anyone else who may have had an inkling that this shooting was about to come, David.
All right, that is the major headline coming in right now. The suspect, the image of him just a short time ago, made public. Again, an 18-year-old believed to be a member of that community and a student at the high school there. Governor Abbott, again, confirming that number we came on the air with a bit ago, earlier this afternoon, when we reported that we believe that up to 14 children could be dead. And now, sadly, the governor has confirmed those numbers, along with just a few more details of what played out this afternoon. Let's listen to the governor now.
First, I want to tell you that what happened in Uvalde is a horrific tragedy that cannot be tolerated in the state of Texas. And there is swift action being taken by local law enforcement as well as the Texas Department of Public Safety. They obviously now know who the shooter was, and the shooter is no longer alive. Let me give you some details, and then I'll give you a summation about that. The shooter was Salvador Ramos, an 18-year-old male who resided in Uvalde. It's believed that he abandoned his vehicle and entered into the Robb Elementary School in Uvalde with a handgun, and he may have also had a rifle, but that is not yet confirmed according to my most recent report. He shot and killed horrifically, incomprehensibly, 14 students and killed a teacher. Mr. Romas, the shooter, he himself is deceased and is believed that responding officers killed him. It appears that 2 responding officers were struck by rounds but have no serious injuries. The Uvalde Consolidated Independent School District Police Department is the investigating agency, and we will provide them and the city of Uvalde substantial investigative and patrol assistance. We're in the process of obtaining detailed background information on the subject, his motive, the types of weapons used, the legal authority to possess them, and conduct a comprehensive crime scene investigation and reconstruction, and identify and interview all witnesses and provide victim services and other support as needed. Victor Escalon is the Texas Department of Public Safety South Texas Regional Director. He is on the scene, and everything that can be done will be done. In addition to that, it is being reported that the subject shot his grandmother right before he went into the school. And I have no further information about the connection between those 2 shootings. And the subject is reported to be to have been a student at Uvalde High School and is a U.S. citizen. Bottom line is this, however, and that is when parents drop their kids off at school, they have every expectation to know that they're going to be able to pick their child up when that school day ends. And there are families who are in mourning right now, and the state of Texas is in mourning with them for the reality that these parents are not going to be able to pick up their children. Our job is multifold. First, to make sure we address exactly what happened at this crime scene, and then second, to make sure we take that information and do everything that is necessary to ensure that crime scenes like this are not going to be repeated in the future, and that we're going to be able to ensure the safety and security of our schools.
You were listening to Texas's governor just a short time ago confirming those awful numbers playing out this afternoon in Uvalde, a small rural town in Texas. Fewer than 20,000 people live there. Those numbers, 14 children killed, a teacher shot and killed as well. You heard the governor there talk about the suspect's grandmother also prior to this shooting, that the governor said, I can't give you more information on how those shootings are linked, though. Presumably, he killed his grandmother and then headed to the school, though we'll wait for authorities to confirm that when they do come before the cameras this afternoon. As you've been watching with us throughout our reporting this afternoon, the size of law enforcement, the presence on the scene continues to grow. Our Maria Villarreal, who is our correspondent in Texas, is on the scene. And Maria, I know you've already interacted with so many families who are just now getting this awful news.
David, it is a heartbreaking situation, and not just as a parent myself, but really as a human, as a person. And we were coming into Uvalde, and you could just feel the intensity of the situation as we were driving in. Everybody is moving quickly here. Everybody is looking for answers. Parents are frantic as we got closer to the school. And I am looking at it right now with the yellow tape all the way around it. As we got closer to the school, I saw parents running down the street towards the school. A couple of them stopped us. We spoke with one family who said they were looking for their 10-year-old niece. They had contacted the hospital. They had contacted the school. They had reached out to people in San Antonio as well because they've heard that that's where victims were taken, and they could not get any information. We connected them with some contacts that we have in San Antonio, and they are right now in touch with them. I got closer to the school, and I was stopped by a dad who asked if I knew how to get to the funeral home because he couldn't find his 10-year-old little girl.
Maria Villarreal. Go ahead.
Sorry, David. It's a really tough situation to be here, and to see this dad, who I know is stoic in most situations.
They're in shock.
The funeral home is a few blocks from where the school is. He did tell me as of right now he was notified and was trying to find more information on Facebook. What he could tell me was he does believe the shooting happened in his daughter's classroom. That classroom is full of young children. He told me young 10-year-old children. He has not been able to confirm that information with school district officials, but he does know a number of parents have gotten together and are sharing information through group text and through Facebook posts. And he is very fearful that his daughter's classroom was the one that was targeted by this shooter. David?
Just unimaginable. Maria Villarreal with the story of just one father now trying to find his own child after word of this horrific shooting in Uvalde, Texas. Governor Abbott confirming those numbers that we had reported earlier. 14 children killed in this shooting, a teacher killed as well, and Governor Abbott adding to that word that the suspect, he said, shot and killed his grandmother right before the shooting at that school. I want to bring in Pierre Thomas, our Chief Justice Correspondent in Washington. And Pierre, as I mentioned just a moment ago, law enforcement presence growing by the minute there on the scene. And I know federal authorities have been watching this since first word.
David, they have been confirming the information that the governor just recently spoke of. And David, I can tell you that there's growing concern that we are in the midst of a surge of these kinds of incidents. Just last week, as you and I were in Buffalo, an 18-year-old there accused of murdering all those black people. Now we have an 18-year-old in that community, believed to be a part of that community, killing so many young people and a teacher. Sources are, in fact, telling me about concern. They're trying to run down this information that he may have, in fact, killed his grandmother. They are doing a deep dive on social media posts by this young man to glean what he was thinking, what he was writing, what he was posting in recent days. This is a full court tilt right now to make sure no one else has knowledge. There are some additional people that they have some questions about. David.
Here, Thomas, tracking this in Washington. We are set to hear from authorities there on the ground in Uvalde. Their first time before the cameras addressing what's played out this afternoon. Let's listen.
There we go.
Good afternoon. As she mentioned, I'm going to make a statement, and at this point we won't take any questions. We will give you a time when we'll be addressing the media soon. At approximately 11:32 a.m. this morning, there was a mass casualty incident at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas. The school has children that are in 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade. I can confirm right now that we have several injuries, adults and students, and we do have some deaths. The suspect is deceased at this point. DPS is assisting with the investigation. And at this point, the investigation is leading to tell us that the suspect did act alone during this heinous crime. Families are being notified, and we are providing services to them as the district should. As far as the rest of the district is concerned, safety measures were taken to make sure that we had a safe release for the rest of the district throughout our city of Uvalde. And we had numerous law enforcement officers and agencies that assisted with the safety release for those students. We do want to keep all their families in their prayers. I hope you do as well. And we also want to respect the privacy of the family. It is still being worked on. And again, we'll notify the parents and the families as soon as we have some news for them. Thank you so much.
We greatly appreciate your understanding and patience with us. Please know at this time, we are only making a statement. We will be releasing more information as the investigation continues. We appreciate your courtesy. At this time, it concludes our press conference.
Authorities that there could be more of this, and just look what's played out in the last week and a half here. 10 days ago, we were standing in Buffalo at the scene of that horrific shooting at the grocery store. 9 days ago, Laguna Woods, California, the man who walked into the church there, and now
It's not that it's just COVID, but COVID on top of this epidemic of gun violence in our country is creating the perfect storm for these types of attacks to start to almost snowball. And the concern we have, of course, is every time there's an attack, we worry about copycats, we worry about further inspiration, even if it's not necessarily for the same grievance or ideology. Just the mere fact that an attack occurs and it gets attention can be the trigger that causes somebody to decide, well, today's the day I'm going to take that action I've been thinking about and go and kill somebody. So it's just a very dangerous and heightened threat period right now. And if we can encourage the viewers, if there is a loved one or somebody that you're in contact with and you have concerns, please say something. Please talk to them. And if you can, try to get them help through a mental health professional. And if they're unwilling to engage with you, call law enforcement. You might be able to see the one indicator that somebody is about to commit an act of violence, and you might be able to help stop it. But right now, we're just in a very precarious environment, and we need everybody to look out for one another.
Elizabeth Newman, formerly with the Department of Homeland Security and the Trump administration, with us here this afternoon. Elizabeth, thank you. I think your points are all very well made, urging the American people who are witnessing yet another horrific shooting playing out in America to think about loved ones.
Of getting people, let's say in this community, let's use it for an example. What was the relationship between the staff and the students at the high school where this kid apparently attended? There'll be pieces of information about what this kid was going to do. He apparently was all over social media, from what I can briefly gather. Don't know the specifics. There'll be pieces of information. He may even have videos of himself. Who saw them? Could they have reported them? So this boils down to relationships. Relationships of students with teachers, with law enforcement officers. Can you build some trust in the community or inside a school or inside a factory? How many times have we talked about these shootings being at a place of employment where people will talk and they'll tell you things they're hearing or seeing? They may not be accurate, but you've got to follow up, and that is really the key. We're not going to do anything, in my professional and personal view, about firearms. It just sort of, that's what we're doing. And nobody really wants to change that law. And so if you're not going to do anything about that, then you have to do something about our relationships and our ability to bring information forward so we can get in front of these shooters. We do it occasionally, but unfortunately, like Buffalo, like today, we're talking about something after the fact, which we never, ever want to do.
Brad Garrett with us here this afternoon as we just begin to watch this case, the pieces of this very early still come together. Brad, thank you for what has become a familiar pattern. A young person in a community, this time a young man, 18 years old, believed to be a student at Uvalde high school there. Whether or not he was still in class or not remains an unanswered question at this hour, but authorities say he did shoot and kill his grandmother before then going to the Robb Elementary School, where he then shot and killed 14 children and the teacher there as well. I want to bring in Isaias Melendez, an eyewitness at the scene. And Isaias, first of all, I'm sorry that you have to join us under such horrific circumstances. Can you tell us what you saw, what you heard, and where you are?
Yeah, I'll go
After
back
he
to
had
her
shot
a
and
second.
killed his grandmother, authorities are now
I want to get a picture of
at
this
Robb
guy.
Elementary School in the Uvalde district there. The alleged gunman is also dead, and we have just received an image of that gun.
I don't know where his name is, though, but Salvatore Martinez or Marcia or something. Texas shooter.
Gunman, 18, very careful. They're not to actually give any numbers, though. The governor has provided those numbers, at least what we know so far. Again, you heard authorities there say this started playing out 11:32 a.m. Texas time in Uvalde. Of course, we know that is now about 80 miles outside of San Antonio, inside an elementary school. Authorities there saying students there are in the second, third, and fourth grades, though they didn't say exactly which class.
Go to the school. That's exactly what Adam Lanza did in Newtown at Sandy Hook. We've seen it in other mass shootings. It doesn't change the reality. It may perhaps change the mindset. But to sort of expand a little bit what Elizabeth was talking about, we really need to do a much better job of getting people, let's say in this community, let's use it for
this evening when he arrives back at the White House, obviously after his overseas trip, that from Karine Jean-Pierre, the White House press secretary, moments ago, the statement from the president. I want to bring in Brad Garrett, a longtime ABC News consultant. Brad, you and I have been on the air with so many of these awful shootings, and now that we've learned a little more about the suspect, it helps to begin to put the pieces together of what is, in some cases, sort of a familiar pattern that we see in some of these cases, a family member or a loved one targeted before then a location somewhere in the community targeted next.
So I think what that tells you, David, that this guy just wanted to go on a rampage and annihilate people that were close or were important in his life. So we don't know the relationship, obviously, with the grandmother, but there's something there. So from there, he goes to the school. Again, we don't know the connection to the school, but it did represent something to him. And if he knew anything about this school, and the reason you have so many casualties is a small classroom. If you
Okay, it says Karine Jean-Pierre, the new press secretary. President Biden has been briefed on the horrific news of the elementary school shooting in Texas and will continue to be briefed regularly as information becomes available. His prayers are with the families impacted by this awful event, and he will speak this evening when he arrives back at the White House.
If you break into a classroom, a teacher, a dozen or so students, maybe more in a classroom, the idea that you could sadly shoot everyone in there in just a few seconds is the sad reality, and he probably knew that. He also knew that he was not going to leave that school. Either law enforcement was going to kill him or he was going to kill himself, because that's sort of part of the reality when you start with killing a loved one before you go to the school. That's exactly what Adam Lanza did in Newtown at Sandy Hook. We've seen it in other mass shootings. It doesn't change the reality. It may perhaps change the mindset. But to sort of expand a little bit what Elizabeth was talking about, we really need to do a much better job of getting people, let's say in this community, let's use it for an example. What was the relationship between the staff and the students at the high school where this kid apparently attended? There'll be pieces of information about what this kid was going to do. He apparently was all over social media, from what I can briefly gather. Don't know the specifics. There'll be pieces of information. He may even have videos of himself. Who saw them? Could they have reported them? So this boils down to relationships of students with teachers, with law enforcement officers. Can you build some trust in the community or inside a school or inside a factory? How many times have we talked about these shootings being at a place of employment where people will talk and they'll tell you things they're hearing or seeing? They may not be accurate, but you got to follow up, and that is really the key. We're not going to do anything, in my professional and personal view, about firearms. It just sort of, that's what we're doing. And nobody really wants to change that law. And so if you're not going to do anything about that, then you have to do something about our relationships and our ability to bring information forward so we can get in front of these shooters. We do it occasionally, but unfortunately, like Buffalo, like today, we're talking about something after the fact, which we never, ever want to do.
Brad Garrett with us here this afternoon as we just begin to watch this case, the pieces of this very early still come together. Brad, thank you for what has become a familiar pattern. A young person in a community, this time a young man, 18 years old, believed to be a student in Uvalde, the high school there. Whether or not he was still in class or not remains an unanswered question at this hour, but authorities say he did shoot and kill his grandmother before then going to the Robb Elementary School, where he then shot and killed 14 children and a teacher there as well. I want to bring in Isaias Melendez, an eyewitness at the scene. And Isaias, first of all, I'm sorry that you have to join us under such horrific circumstances.
We're going to listen to their interview here with this person. I've never been on Getter yet, Nick. I have used Rumble. It's pretty good. But isn't Getter the one for Trump? I thought he was going to name his like Truther or something like that. So, I hope you find out how to use that. I've never been on there.
Can you tell us what you saw, what you heard, and where you are?
Yeah, well, it was just this morning I was sitting with my friend and we were just hanging out at his house, and I got a call from my mom asking if I heard the gunshots, because we do live in the same area as the school. And I said no. And as we were on the phone, we could just hear more gunshots. And then she walked outside and got in the car to go see what was going on, because, well, I wasn't home. And there was cops driving, so many cops, like, speeding towards the school. And she told me to go see what was going on at the school.
FBI
and,
is involved.
Well, I told my friend if he wanted to go check it out. He said yeah, so we went to go check it out. And that's whenever the Border Patrol, there was just any type of law enforcement just there trying to see what was going on, trying to help out. Everybody just going crazy, parents running up and down, and the helicopter hovering over the school. And we heard the gunshots, and they were saying that the shooter was actually shooting out the window and having to shoot out with the cops broad daylight in front of our eyes. Parents going crazy because children were scared and they were running out of the school.
You could actually see some of the children from the other classrooms running from the school?
Yeah, running out of the school.
And Isaias, what else can you tell us about the community? I know it's a small town. I'm sure most families are familiar with everyone else who lives there, a community that sort of relies on one another, depends on one another.
Yeah, a very small community. I mean, every single kid that got shot, there's some kind of relation. I know every single one. Either it's some of my friends or some of my friends' cousins, or, I mean, actually 2 of the kids that got shot were 2 of my girlfriend's cousins.
And without naming any names, we certainly don't want to do that on the air here. We want to wait for law enforcement to do that, because they have the painful task of notifying the family. So we don't want names on the air, certainly. But can you tell us anything more about what age range we believe that some of these victims are, what grade the classroom was, or classrooms that were targeted?
I'm not too sure. I'm not too sure on that.
And what can you tell us about help for these parents that you described running to and from the scene, help with them trying to find their loved ones? Were you able to see if any of those parents were in fact helped, consoled? Are they getting what they need?
No, you could just see the fear in their eyes. I mean, we were all told to step back. I mean, we didn't know what was going on. We were just all told to step back. And I mean, as a parent, I mean, I guess it doesn't matter. You're going to put your life in jeopardy for your kid.
Isaias Melendez, we really do appreciate your observations on such a horrific day in your community, and I'm sorry for you having to live through and witness what you saw there this afternoon. But you've been listening here to ABC News Live coverage. The witness there talking about watching parents run to the school, trying to find out anything they could about their own children, their own loved ones, waiting for word from authorities. Isaias also described the gunshots that he could still hear once he arrived at that school, and also the children running from the school, from the other classrooms, to safety. All of this as he was standing there watching this play out. I want to bring in Maria Villarreal, our correspondent who's already on the scene, and she was telling us earlier about the father who had not heard about his own child. I'm curious if we know anything more about him. And Maria, you've also learned about the general age range of some of the victims this afternoon.
Yeah, David. So as we were walking right up to the school, as you can see, it's right behind me. We've spoken with several family members, several parents, each one of them telling us that the child they cannot find at the Civic Center, where evacuations were happening, at the hospitals nearby and in San Antonio. The children's ages that are still missing are 10 years old, which puts them right around 4th grade. Now, again, school district officials are not releasing a whole lot of information at this time, but this is information we are getting directly from parents. These are parents we saw running to the school to try and find their kids. One father I spoke with, as you just mentioned, not more than about 15 minutes ago, stopped me in the street, and he asked me if I knew where the funeral home was. That funeral home is about 4 blocks away from us down this street. As you can see, there is a heavy, heavy law enforcement presence here right now. We have Department of troopers, DPS here on site, local law enforcement as well, Border Patrol agents. And for those of you that might be wondering why there might be a heavy Border Patrol agent presence, that's because we're not too far from the border. I've spoken with the mayor's office as well. He tells us right now this is a very flexible and fluid situation. But one thing he could tell us was this is a community that is very strong, very connected, a community of farmers and ranchers. And this is a very devastating situation for them. I mean, this town has less than 20,000 people in it. So this is an extremely, extremely difficult situation for them. A lot of these family members are lingering right behind us. They are waiting to hear any information they can from not just law enforcement, but even school district officials. Just about a minute or two ago, we did see FBI SWAT vehicles go right through here, larger vehicles than what we are normally used to seeing. A lot of times when these vehicles come on site, it is for 2 reasons. One, to try and check the location for any sort of explosive devices that may have been taken on by the suspect. That is not the case in this situation. These vehicles look like vehicles that will be used to try and take victims out of the school. Again, David, we're very cautious in the information that we're releasing right now because, as we heard just a bit ago, both the governor, law enforcement, and school district officials are being very limited in what they're telling us, and that is because they want to make sure they get in contact with all of the parents before giving us that info. David?
Maria Villarreal, we appreciate your reporting, and we know as a mom yourself, it's not easy arriving at the scene of these awful, awful shootings and having to interact with family members, just as you simply report out the story and the pain that you describe from that father. We could all feel in your description. So, Maria, we'll come back to you. Thank you. Thank you for that. Lee Waldman. Classrooms. We heard our reporter on the scene, Maria Villarreal, just from anecdotes from parents who've arrived there. Again, no names of any of the victims have been released. We'll leave that to the authorities. But anecdotally, Maria telling us that the parents looking for their loved ones, looking for their children, repeatedly said to Maria, among the other questions they were asking her about where to find this information, saying, we're just looking for information on our 10-year-old. That was
Salvador Ramos, a student at Uvalde High School, and he is believed to have shot and killed his grandmother before entering Robb Elementary School and opening fire with a firearm that has not yet been made clear, according to police. They're still trying to track down the weapon. Shot and killed 14 elementary school students along with 1 teacher, and law enforcement sources tell us, David, that the suspect, 18-year-old Salvador Ramos himself, was killed there at the scene.
And Aaron, again, Salvador Ramos believed to be a student in that district.
A student in the very community where he opened fire, it's believed, according to police, a student at Uvalde High School. Whether he was still going to classes or whether he had stopped going hasn't been made clear. But according to the governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, Salvador Ramos is or was a student at Uvalde High School, the very community where Robb Elementary School is located, that came under fire by this gunman after he had shot and killed his grandmother. Authorities are now trying to go through his background to see what connection he may have had to that elementary school. They're also trying to run down social media and find any potential friends or acquaintances just to see if there were any accomplices or anyone else who may have had an inkling that this shooting was about to come, David.
All right, that is the major headline coming in right now. The suspect had the image of him just a short time ago made public. Again, an 18-year-old believed to be a member of that community and a student at the high school there. Governor Abbott, again, confirming that number. We came on.
I thought I subbed you or added you as a friend. Yeah, I have Twitter. It's access to Christ so that I could see everything. Let me see if I got you, Bubba. Bubba News. Is that your Twitter? Probably not going to come up, is it? Do the @ sign. Bubba News, is that you? I don't see anything on that one. Bubba, Bubba, Bubba. Hubba, hubba, bubba. Hubba, bubba. Bubba News, Bubba News. Bubba, Bubba, Bubba. Real Bubba News. Is that you? Are you real Bubba News? Don't look like it. June 4, 2017. Hi, Trinity. Oh, you're welcome, sweetie. I'm sorry for your loss. I'm really drained by it all. It's had to get on here about the children though, because it's just, another death, another children getting taken out before their time. He was just a child, wasn't he? 42, I think he was. Yeah. It's kind of hard to do the news, really. It's I'm glad I started a little while back just to kind of see if I liked it. And I don't really particularly like to do the reporting end of it. I'd rather just send somebody the articles and watch them do it. And then he just had a sort of pizzazz about, things. So yeah, we need to pray. I want to put up 1 Timothy. My phone died, so to go by memory here, I think it's 1 Timothy chapter 3, was it? Maybe it was 2 Timothy chapter 3. There it is. The dangers of the last days. You should know this, Timothy, that in the last days there will be very difficult times, for people will love only themselves and their money. They will be boastful and proud, scoffing at God, disobedient to their parents, and killing their grandmas, and ungrateful. They will consider nothing sacred. They will be unloving and unforgiving. They will shoot children at an elementary school. They will slander others and have no self-control. They will be cruel and hate what is good. They won't be taught what's good either. They will betray their friends and talk bad about them on social media. And they'll be reckless and puffed up with pride and love pleasure rather than God. They will act religious, but they will reject the power that could make them godly. Stay away from people like that. So I just wanted to read that because that's what we're to expect. These dangers of the last days. Let me just pray for them. Lord Jesus, I just ask you to be with the parents of these children that died today and the ones that got shot that are still in the hospital. Be with the officers that got shot and be with the boy that shot them, his family members, and help them to be able to get through the tragedy of losing that grandma, a 66-year-old grandma. And Lord, just be with everybody that knew them, because grieving just kind of reaches out and touches a lot of people. Even if they weren't really close, they can still be affected by what people are going through. So I just ask you, Lord, to give everybody peace and comfort. Holy Spirit, comfort people and help people to realize what's really important. Help everybody to get saved before the great and terrible day of the Lord begins. In Jesus' name, amen. Yeah, that day that he read Colossians, I was going through a really hard time that day, and I just asked him to read 3 scriptures, and he was like, I'll read it for you. And I was like, okay. And he read the whole thing. He read the whole chapter. Yeah, that was a special day. I think the Lord was working on him the whole time. And yeah, 2 Tuesday on the 22nd. Yeah, all twos. Yeah. So I think the Lord had him in his hands and knew exactly when to take him, and just was, the timing of it was God's timing, and he knew what was going to happen, and he'd been working on him for well, a long time. But I was watching today him with his mom, talking to her on the phone before she died, and that was a hard day for him. And I just lost my mom on Mother's Day, so that was really hard to go back and watch. I'm really drained, Trinity. I'm just really drained from it all. I'm sure you've cried your little eyes out too. Yeah, you got a great channel too, Trinity. Keep going, okay? Oh, you did? You just lost your dad? I lost my dad, I think it's been 4 years now, in June. So yeah, both my parents are gone now. And they're with Jesus. I can have joy over that. Jesus has got people in his arms, just getting ready to, come back for us, and then we'll all be together for eternity. That's what gets me through. Yeah, I'm sorry. It's hard, isn't it? Just like missing. It feels like they're missing. They're just not there. You can't get a hold of them. That it's kind of like you just can't reach out anymore. You can't. Better say what needs to be said now. Anybody that listens to this, talk to your parents. Don't hold any unforgiveness in your heart towards anybody. Just forgive everybody, because we also need to be forgiven, because we've all failed. We've all come short of God's glory, and no one here is perfect. So just keep forgiving people. Jesus said, if you don't forgive others, my Father won't forgive you. So we better forgive people. Well, Bubba, I guess you're gone now, but I was going to get on there on your Twitter if I could find it. Yeah, it's important everybody does. Trinity, keep going with your channel. It's important everybody keeps speaking the truth, because this is it. This is the stretch of road that now we have to continue walking down. We have to endure to the end of our race, and if we can contact each other, that'd be awesome, wouldn't it? Like, get with other people that are doing the news, and just to encourage each other and support each other. Yeah, keep trying. It's hard though, isn't it? Especially, when every day for, I guess, 2 years or so now, I've been sending him news. I was looking back at the day that I started, and it was in 2019 when I started sending him news. So I prefer that, but it's not going to happen anymore. But I just wish he would have. I don't know. I had so much fun. There were days that it was fun. It was really fun because, he was paying attention and he was like, you got something here, and he'd grab it, or he'd go over to Telegram and get on Tony's, uh, Telegram channel, and there'd be a list of things and he'd go down through them, and everybody was throwing things in there, but it was never really designated and organized. He wasn't a very organized person. Yeah, it drove everybody crazy, and especially I guess Hayes, because Hayes would call him and say, "I got this article right here," and it'd be funny because he'd just go, "Okay, Governor Kemp not involved in settlement over Georgia," and that would be all of it. He would just like move on. I wish all of his videos were up. I went through them today and downloaded some. They weren't all there. I had a couple, that I had recorded, but it's just too bad. YouTube did him dirty, and a lot of other truthers, they did him dirty, taking him down. I mean, we've got a window of opportunity. I'm about to go right now. We got a window of opportunity to do what we can to get the truth out, and then the ministry of truth, or the religion of lies, is going to come down hard and just knock everybody out that's not going along with their agenda. And I'd say that's going to come with this, WHO thing. The ministry of truth and all, it's going to crack down quick. So we just keep going until they stop us and push back against the gates of hell. Well, thank you everybody for coming. Yes, Trinity, thank you for coming. And God bless everybody. May God bless you and keep you and make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you and give you peace. Love you, everybody.